our family for hosting us. Tiskul mitzvot. Okay, so I just want to get started. I'm trying to gauge where everybody is up to in terms of the introduction to the laws of Shabbat. Did you guys talk about where the laws of Shabbat come from and all that stuff? No?
You just mentioned how important it is. I'm white, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just do a very brief. Did we start recording it?
Yes, you did.
Amazing. So let's just do a very brief overview of where the laws of Shabbat come from. To be clear, it's very important. If you look in the Torah, you really don't find much of the laws of Shabbat at all. The only thing that you'll find is that it says you can't light a fire on Shabbat. You'll also find a couple of psukim talking about plowing and charishu katzir, plowing and harvesting, and it doesn't really tell you much because even that is a dispute. What is it talking about? Some say it's talking about Shemitah, some say it's talking about Shabbat. It's all machloket. So where do the 39 halachot come from? So the answer to that question is when Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Har Sinai, he told the Jewish people two things. He told them that you have to keep Shabbat, and then he told them you also have to build a Mishkan. After the sin of the golden calf, they needed to build a Mishkan to fix, so to say, what was done. So the question is, why the two things side by side? You have to keep Shabbat, you have to build a Mishkan. The answer to that question is, you have to look at the construction of the Mishkan. Whatever is done in order to construct the Mishkan, that is what you can't do on Shabbat. Those are the 39 melachot that are forbidden on Shabbat. So the actual explanation to where we have all 39 melachot is the Torah Shebe'al Peh, the oral Torah that explained to us what was done in order to construct the Mishkan. Once we found out those actions that were taken in order to build the Mishkan, those in number are 39, and 39 are the melachot that are forbidden to be done on Shabbat. So that is the first introduction. Now, I'm making it extremely brief. I would normally go into a lot of other things, but I was given a topic to speak about today, so I'm going to focus on that topic. So that is the following. I want to understand, everyone should know where the melachot come from. We're going to zone in now on one of the melachot, actually two of the melachot that we are going to talk about. The first one we already mentioned, which is not lighting a fire or creating a fire or increasing a fire, or actually, so to be clear, it could be even three melachot. That's called havara, that's called ish. That's number one. Number two, we're not allowed to extinguish a fire as well on Shabbat. That's a third melacha called kibui. And third, we're also going to talk about the melacha of cooking, which is bishul. So in this one topic that we're going to speak about today, we're going to cover actually, or discuss, we're going to touch on three subjects, three melachot. So that's called, the topic of today's shiur is Shehiya. That's the request that I was given to discuss today's shiur. Shehiya. Shehiya means leaving food on an open fire. That's what Shehiya means. That's the definition of Shehiya. And the question is, thank you so much. Question is, are we allowed to leave food cooking on an open fire before Shabbat? That is the discussion of today's shiur. Now, why would there be an issue? Let's make one thing very clear. Any melacha that began before Shabbat may continue on into Shabbat. Okay? So if you start something before Shabbat, there is no problem with that continuing into Shabbat. That is the opinion of Bet Hillel, and that's what we follow. You can have something begin before Shabbat, and there's no problem of it going into Shabbat. So for example, as far as the law of cooking is concerned, if I take a piece of meat and I put it in a pot on a fire before Shabbat, let's just talk before we get into the bottom line halachot, just to make the concept clear. When you do such a thing, you take a piece of meat, you put it in a pot on a fire before Shabbat, and it cooks all throughout Shabbat, are you violating the melacha of bishul, which is one of the 39 melachot? The answer is no. Why? Because when did you start? You started before Shabbat. So that is the first important thing to understand. So even if a person were to do such a thing, would he be in, or she, would she be in violation of bishul on Shabbat? The answer is no. Why? because it started before Shabbat. Similarly, this goes for any melacha. If you put a trap out before Shabbat and it caught something on Shabbat, did you violate Shabbat? No, because your action was before Shabbat. Okay? That's the first thing that we have to understand. So we're not really talking about a violation of cooking right now. Okay? Why? Because whatever you're doing before Shabbat. Okay? So there is no violation of cooking taking place right now. Is that clear to everybody? You have a question? Yes.
Sorry. Does the meat, for example, have to be 3/4 cooked?
Okay, wait, so one second. That's what I wanted to say. We're not getting to bottom lines just yet. I'm just explaining a concept right now.
Sorry.
So, because you see, to be honest with you guys, I would never jump into this like we're doing right now, but I'm just trying to do the best that I can to give you the idea in order to be able to understand where we're headed. So I'm laying down the brickwork, so to say, to build the concept, and then you'll get the bottom line. So let's just be clear. Is Bishul happening now? No, it started before Shabbat. Okay, fine. So now what's the issue then? Where is there any problem? The answer to the question is the following. Chazal, which means Chachamenu, Zichronam Libracha, our sages of blessed memory, they looked at the situation and they said, this is a very, very problematic scenario. The discussion I just described to you about a person putting a piece of meat in a pot and cooking it right before Shabbat, or maybe a few hours before Shabbat, could be very problematic. What problem am I speaking about? Well, you have to remember that Baruch Hashem, we're very blessed. We have gas ovens, we have stoves, we have all kinds of things that cook things very well. Think more in terms of old time. Think more of like a barbecue with charcoal. You have to stand there and fan it and make it, flames, make the flames, ensure that it keeps on cooking. So, Chazal at the time had those types of stoves and ovens as well. And in order to ensure that the flames keep going, they would stoke the coals. They would have coals on the bottom of the stove. You would have imagine this over here has 2 holes for 2 pots. That's called a kira. On the bottom you have coals inside of the kira, and they would go and they would stir up the coals in order to make sure that the fire would continue to burn. Okay. So now, here's the issue. There was a grave concern that a person might forget himself. Again, we're talking about perfectly Shomrei Shabbat people, individuals who are fantastically observant. Oops, there goes the camera. Right? So that's okay, don't worry about it. So fantastically observant people that simply forget themselves. And unfortunately, that's human nature. We all forget ourselves. We all forget sometimes that it's Shabbat. How many times you walk into the house and turned on the light or turned off the light and forgot Shabbat? It happens. It happens. So, especially when it comes to food, Chazal knew Jews by food. We are hysterical. We're very, very concerned that the food should come out, the way that it should be. And without realizing it, we may go and stoke the coals at the bottom of the kira in order to make sure that the food is going to be nice and hot and cooked. And that is a very big Isur Deoraita. That's a Torah level prohibition called Mavir. Mavir means you are lighting a fire. Now, the fire was already there. Yeah, but even if you just increase the flame or you cause a flame to come up, and also, by the way, you can even cause a flame to be extinguished. If you move the coal a certain way, you might extinguish one of the flames. That's called Mechabit. Very big problem. Isur Deoraita. The rabbis did not want us to do that. Now, let me just, yes.
What's
Mavir means lighting a fire. Now, I want to be very clear. We are obligated to follow the decrees of our Chachamim. We have an obligation to follow the words of the sages, Zichronam Libracha. What's the best example? Hanukkah is coming up. And when you go ahead and you light Hanukkah candles, what bracha do you say? Baruch atah Amonai Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Chanukah. Question: What do those words mean? Hashem, you commanded me to light Hanukkah candles. And what do I challenge you to do? Look in the entire Torah. The entire Torah, from start to finish. Where did Hashem say to light Hanukkah candles? And guess what? It's not that either. What about Ladlik Ner Shel Shabbat? What about Al Netilat Yadayim? What about Al Mikra Megillah? What about all these things? Mitzvot that we say, Hashem, you commanded us to do this. Where did Hashem command you to wash Netilat Yadayim? Look in the entire Torah. It never says that you have to do that. What's the answer, guys? The answer is that Chachamenu Zichronam Livracha instituted it, and the Torah Kedosha tells us in the Torah, Lo tasur min hadavar asher yagidu lecha yamin u'smol. You're not allowed to veer off what the Chachamim tell you, left or right or left. Whatever they say, you do. So since the Torah tells us that we're supposed to listen to the Chachamim of that generation, for example, who instituted Netilat Yadayim? Shlomo HaMelech. Okay? So we have to listen. Who instituted the rules that we're talking about now in Sheikh Knesset Agdolah, etc.? All these are the leaders of the generation. So we, when they institute that rule, we have to follow that rule as well. And we even make a bracha. We say, Hashem, you commanded us to light Hanukkah candles. You're the one who told us to. How so? Doesn't say in the Torah. No, it does. Why? Because it says, listen to the Chachamim. That's why we light it with a bracha. That's why we read Megillat Esther. We make a bracha. You told us to read Megillat Esther. What do you mean? Torah was written way before Megillat Esther. Yeah, but it says in the Torah, listen to the men of the Great Assembly. When they institute to read Megillat Esther every year, you read Megillat Esther. Okay. So therefore, when the rabbis issue a warning, they issue a concern, they say, look, you're in a danger zone. If you do this, you're inches away from Yisur D'Oraita. So we have a mitzvah to listen to what they tell us, and therefore we follow suit. Just to make it, just to give an example, it's like a person who is walking at the edge of a building. Somebody sent me some videos recently. It's people that walk on the edge of skyscrapers. I don't know why they do it. They jump off from one building to another. They walk at the edges of skyscrapers. They even hang by a finger from the skyscraper. And they get likes on, I don't know, YouTube or whatever videos. They get lots of different things. And it's very crazy. It's very dangerous. And it's obviously a very scary thing to be dangling from a building by your finger. Okay, now let's talk about that guy for a second. Is he still alive? He's alive, right? He got up, he walked off, he went down the elevator, and he's walking, living, breathing, correct? Was he very close to death? Yes, he was very close to death. Okay. Most people would not be able to do what he did. Okay? So what did the Chachamim do? They put a fence around the edge of the building. They said, no, we're not letting you do that kind of thing. We're putting a fence, and you are going to stay within the rooftop. You're not going to be dangled. We're not going to let you dangle. Okay? That's the idea of a takana of Chazal. You're inches from death. Inches. You're like dangling. You're about to drop off the building. Are you still alive? Yeah, you're still alive. But why would you want to put yourself in that position? So we're going to put a fence around that you shouldn't fall down into that situation. We don't want you to die. That's why the Chachamim, when it says in Mishlei, you'll find a pasuk that says "V'haporetz gader." Anyone know the pasuk? "V'haporetz gader yeshachenu nachash." When somebody breaks down a fence, he will be bitten by a snake. And the rabbis interpret that pasuk in Mishlei to mean that when somebody breaks down a fence, so then the snake, he will be bitten by a snake. In other words, as a punishment. So I had a little, insight into that. It's not a punishment. It's that the rabbis see over here there's a snake. There's a snake, and he is dangerous. So what they did is they put a gader, they put a fence up around the snake so that you don't get hurt. If you break the fence, you're now enabling the snake to come bite you, and then he'll bite you. So why would you do such a thing? Clear? So therefore, that's a little intro into the rules of the rabbis. When they make these rules, we have to willingly and happily take on these rules. As it says, even Avraham Avinu did the rules of the rabbis that were not yet born. It's amazing. Vayishmo, what does it say at the end of the first aliyah of Toldot? Vayishmo mishmarti, mitzvotai, chukotai, vetorotai. Avraham Avinu even kept the rules, the Rabbanan, the rabbinic rules like we're talking about now. So right now we're going to be addressing a rabbinic rule. You have a question? No? Okay, great, fine. So let's explain. What is the rule that the rabbis instituted? So they said the following. If you desire to leave food that is cooking on an open flame before Shabbat, if you desire to let that happen, okay? Again, an open flame. So you have the pot, it's sitting on top of an open fire. So then, we have two opinions amongst the Chachamim, and normally I try to just give it to you straight, what do we do bottom line? But the answer of this halacha will be that the lenient opinion is the halacha, but if somebody is machmir, tavo alav bracha. So you need to know both opinions. Okay, that's why I'm explaining this to you. Okay? So the idea is the following. When you want to leave food on an open fire cooking, there are two opinions about whether or not this is allowed to be done and under what circumstances. Again, the fear is that you, unwittingly, may come to open up that bottom of the stove and stir up the coals. In our days, that translates into you might turn up the knob and increase the fire. Right? That's what that would mean for us today, normally speaking. So therefore, the first opinion says, unless the food is cooked to the point that it is no longer in your benefit to increase the flame. The term is called mitztamek veralu. Mitztamek veralu means that this is at the point where the continued cooking is actually going to make it dry and burnt. And it's no longer good for this dish to remain on the fire. Unless that is the situation, you are not allowed to leave it on an open fire. Okay? That's the first opinion. Clear? Okay. So therefore, if let's say it's fully cooked, it's edible, however, you would benefit by leaving it on the fire, it's mitztamek ve'afelo, the continuous cooking is actually beneficial to it, then according to the first opinion, you may not leave it on an open flame. Okay?
If it's cooked, but let's say it has too much gravy and you want the gravy to get less.
Correct. So that's to the benefit of the dish.
That's called
So that's mitztamek. That's mitztamek ve'afelo. The continued cooking is actually to the benefit of the dish. In such a case, the rule is that according to the first opinion, you may not leave that dish on an open fire. Okay. The second opinion, Hanania, he argues and he says, no, it's not the case. As long as the food has been cooked to what's called ma'achal ben derusai. Ma'achal ben derusai means there was a bandit, he was a robber, that was always on the run. His name was Ben derusai. And he never ate his food fully cooked because he couldn't stay in one place for too long. So he would cook his food just to the bare minimum so it's edible, and then he would run away. And he would do that all his life. So how much would he cook his food? The machloket, some say 1/3, some say 1/2 cooked. But let's assume that it's a third cooked. Lenient opinion, okay? So it's a third cooked. As long as it's a third cooked, you can leave it on an open fire. Why? Because once it's edible, then we're not afraid that you're going to go stir up the coals. It's already edible. Two opinions. Okay? Clear so far? Yeah,
And I'm just curious for the first opinion. At first you said unless the food is gonna dry up from cooking, what's even the reason for bringing it up? Why would
Meaning,
anybody want to do that?
When would a person go and stir up the coals? You're gonna stir up the coals if you want it to cook more. You want it to be hotter, you want it to cook better, right? If this food is at the point where the continued cooking is bad for it, so then you're definitely not going to go and stir up the coals.
But then who would keep it on the fire in that situation? Just
like you're
keep
still
it
keeping
warm?
it warm. You want it to still stay hot for the people coming back. You still want to keep it there, but you're not going to go and stir up the coals to make it a bigger flame,
Okay.
right? Because why would you do that? It's going to mess your food up. You wouldn't do that. So the first opinion says that unless it's at that point, you may not leave it on an open fire.
Okay.
The second opinion says, no. As long as it's a third cooked, let's be a little more machmir maybe, a half cooked, you determine what it is, third half, then you are allowed to leave it before Shabbat on an open fire. We are not concerned that you're going to stir up the coals. So far so good?
Who said the first opinion?
Chachamim.
And the second?
Hananya.
Thank you.
Okay? Okay, so that's step one. Now, okay, so that's the argument. Now, what does Shulchan Aruch say? Now we know Shulchan Aruch has a very important way of writing things. He says something in a blanket format, meaning this is the rule, and then he goes, and somebody else says that. So then we take the stricter approach. Why? Because I shouldn't say the stricter, we take the first approach. Whenever he says, this is the rule, then he goes, and someone else goes like that, says that, we go with the one that he says, this is the rule. Okay? It's called Stam V'yesh, we follow the Stam. Which opinion does he say as the Stam? Stam, the one that is just, this is the rule, he goes with Chachamim. The Chachamim that say that unless the food is at the point where it's mitztamek viralo, and unless that is the case, you may not leave it on an open fire. Okay? That's how he rules. And then he says, and you should know, some say that we follow Chananya, and therefore, as long as it's a third or a half cooked, you can go ahead and leave it on the open fire. Okay. Now, something very interesting happened over here. We know that Sephardic Jews and pretty much all the Middle Eastern countries, they follow the psak of Maran, Shulchan Aruch. That's what we do, for the most part. Even the Ben Ish Chai said, most of the time we follow Shulchan Aruch. Put it this way, we're usually never more lenient. If the Shulchan Aruch is more machmir, we would not be more lenient. That's usually the rule. However, if you look in the later poskim, they say something very interesting. They say that Sephardic tradition predating Shulchan Aruch is to follow the lenient opinion, like Hananya. Which means that if a person wants to leave his or her food on an open flame cooking before Shabbat, even if it's just a half cooked or a third cooked, whatever opinion it is, so then it's okay. The halacha is that it's okay. Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef writes that in his Yalkut Yosef. So it's a very unique thing because we never go against Maran. We're never more lenient, but this minhag predated Maran, which is a very interesting idea. Okay? So the halacha is that we follow Chananya. You're allowed to leave it on an open fire as long as it's half cooked. Let's put it on the then the third say half cooked. Okay, fine. Now, but the poskim do say, since Maran was machmir, so somebody who wants to be machmir, tavo alav beracha. You don't leave it on an open fire unless it's mitztamek veralo, which is at the point where it's the continued cooking is detrimental to it. So then, if you do that, you deserve to be blessed. Clear? Clear?
Is it shown hot open fire? It's an open fire?
It's a good question. It's a good question. So the answer is simply speaking, yes. Simply speaking, yes. Now, take note of the fact that this entire discussion is about what? Leaving food on an open fire. Just directly on the fire. That was a discussion about that issue only. Here comes the idea of a blech. Now, the word blech is a Yiddish word, right? It means a cover of metal on top of a fire. A hot plate in Hebrew is a plata. Okay? I will be referring to a piece of metal on an open fire as a blech, and I will be referring to a hot plate as a plata, or a hot plate. Okay? Just to make it clear. A blech is not a hot plate. Let's just get that out of the way. A blech is a sheet of metal that goes on a fire. A hot plate is something else. Dota cheese mochel.
Yeah.
Right? Okay? Clear? Okay? Just to be clear, it's two separate things. Okay, fine. Now, what is the significance of a hot plate or a blech in this discussion? The idea is the following. A blech, let's talk about a blech. The Mishnah says that all of this discussion is about leaving it on an open fire. But what if you do something to show that you have a reminder, at least this is the way one of the Rishonim learns, this is a reminder for yourself to not touch the fire, not touch the coals, not stir anything. So the obvious, easiest reminder would be to remove the coals and then you won't have the problem. True. Is there another option? The answer is yes. At the time of the Mishnah, they gave the option of taking ashes and covering the coals with ashes. The covering of coals with ashes would serve as a reminder not to mess with the flame. According to others, it would lower the temperature as well. So it would be already a sign that you are removing yourself from any discussion about this fire over here. You're taking yourself out of the picture. Hesed chadat, it's called. You're taking your thoughts away from this act of cooking over here. So if you do that, if you make that covering, so then the Mishnah says, you don't care how much it's cooked or not cooked. It doesn't make a difference. Because since at this point, you have covered the flame, so now you have officially indicated that you are not going to be touching this fire at all, and you have set up a reminder for yourself that you're not touching it at all. Okay? That's the benefit of doing it this way. So therefore, if a person covers the flame, he or she no longer has any concern. You have no need to worry about how cooked or uncooked the item is. Clear? That's yes.
Does it matter if we cover the knobs also? Because I know the issue is actually turning the knobs, not
Correct.
touching the literal.
So the answer is the knobs are not the issue. Chazal were concerned about covering the fire itself. That was the issue. It's a wonderful thing to cover the knobs, but let's put it this way. If you only cover the knobs, you did not do what you're supposed to do. You understand? If that's what you're trying to accomplish. It would not accomplish that. You need to cover the fire first and foremost. If you also get some of the blechs, the sheets of metal, they actually come in an L shape. So it's like this and a little bit going down to cover the knobs of the stove. So excellent, that's great. Okay, so now let's be clear. The blech accomplishes that I've covered the fire. At this point, it no longer matters before Shabbat how cooked or not cooked the food is. Why? Because I've made a reminder for myself, and therefore I'm good. Clear? Yes? Are we happy?
Quick
Okay.
question.
Yes.
So instead of covering the entire stove, how about if you have individual for each burner? Like the Persians have like something that you put under the rice to make sure it doesn't burn.
Okay.
So can that be considered the blech, or does it have to be a complete?
Your fire is totally covered?
Yeah.
I think it should be good.
Don't those things have holes in them?
They do.
So then
Oh.
the fire's not completely covered.
But it's
also
like
only the
teeny,
top,
it's
it's
very
not
small
covering
hole.
that you can't see the flame.
I don't know. I don't know about this thing. I want to see it myself.
It's
but
called
if-
a
as long
flame
as-
spreader.
I'm sorry?
It's called a flame spreader. in
Flame
English.
spreader.
So
Oh.
it goes on, it distributes it evenly so that one part doesn't burn, and it goes on top of the grate of oven, so you can still fully see the flame,
Oh, no, so that wouldn't be good. You need to cover it.
right?
It
Is that what
needs
you're
to-
talking about?
Yeah, so I guess I
No, if you
didn't know
can
that's
still-
what it's called.
If you can
but
still
it's
see the
usually-
flame, then you haven't accomplished anything. It needs to be totally covered. That's the idea. Okay, so that's regarding that. So that's the idea of Shehiya, and that's the idea of what we call katum. Katum means that you have covered the fire. Okay. The benefit of a hot plate is that there are multiple, you see, I want to make something clear. I'm only discussing just because that's what I've been asked to talk about, Shehiya. But there's an entire other area of benefit that comes up in this area regarding Chazara, which is a different subject. And you benefit in terms of Chazara too, which is the act of putting stuff back on the flame, back on the fire. You cannot do that if it's not covered. We're going to talk about that another time. That's number, and there are many other conditions as well for that. So that's a different subject. But regarding Shehiya, the idea is that as long as that fire is covered completely, so then before Shabbat, if you would like to leave it on that fire, since the fire is covered, you are allowed to leave it there, and it doesn't matter how cooked or uncooked it is. That's what we've gained by covering the fire. Yes?
But then, like, as Danina said, how does this apply to hot plate?
Okay, let's talk about hot plates.
No, sorry, not hot plate. The
Shalom pot.
cholent pot.
Let's get there.
The crock pot.
Okay, let's do it now. So the idea of a cholent pot is the following. The cholent pot is a ceramic type of insert that goes into the heating element. In this case, the simple approach would be that the heating element is considered the fire, and therefore, when you put your cholent pot into that before Shabbat, so then you run into the question of how cooked or uncooked is your cholent. If it's so cooked before Shabbat that the continued cooking is detrimental to the cholent, then you would be allowed to leave it on open fire. If you're following the lenient opinion, then as long as it's 1/3 cooked or a half cooked, you would be allowed to leave it on the open fire, no problem. Here's the issue though. What if it's less than 1/3 cooked, right? So now you can't leave it on an open fire, right? You have a problem. So what's the solution? The answer is make a blech. How do you make a blech? The answer is you take tinfoil and you cover every part of the heating element so that the pot is not touching the heating element, but rather it's touching the tinfoil that's in it. If you come to my house, for example, on Shabbat, you would see that my crock pot has tinfoil all around the heating element, and the insert is sitting on top of it. Also, some say that helps for an issue of hatmana, of insulation, which is a separate discussion as well. Because it's a little bit more elevated, it's not sitting directly inside of the pot. So, yes.
Would the only reason to use the tinfoil be if you're gonna put the pot, if you're gonna put the ingredients in under a third cook? Is there another reason to use it?
So as I was saying, it's also for hatmana purposes. It's a different issue, which we'll get to
What
later.
about if you put like a plastic bag inside
Inside where?
the ceramic?
That will not help you because it's a question of the pot being directly on the fire.
No, I'm saying for hatmana. It's not insulated.
Putting a plastic bag in the
No,
ceramic?
people use it so that it's easier to clean.
Yes, yes. I don't think that helps you for hatmana because the hatmana issue is that it's sitting totally inside the insert. In other words, the insert is sitting totally inside the heating element. It's sitting like in it. So those who think it's a hatmana problem say it's totally in, so you have a problem. So the tinfoil actually elevates it somewhat. So some say that helps as well. Yeah.
Can it just be like a sheet, or does it have to be like balls of tinfoil?
No. I mean, it needs to cover. The point is that the insert of the crock pot should not directly touch the walls of the.
Right. So I'm saying, so it's enough that it's just lined with the.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like balls, so it's like raised up or something, right?
So for Shehiya purposes, definitely it's enough that it's just covering it. Yeah. Usually it ends up being that it elevates it anyway, even without the walls. But yeah.
And does tinfoil also need to be surrounding the walls, or just the bottom part? Surrounding the walls as well, right?
What do you mean? Yeah. So that the insert does not
The
touch.
fire, everything.
Yeah. Any part of the element. Okay.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I thought, but is there a halacha that it either has to be not cooked at all if you want to put it right before Shabbat, or it
We'll
has
get
to be
to it. We'll get there in a second. Again, so this entire discussion, so far has been either you want to leave it on an open fire, and then you have to know how cooked or uncooked it is, or you cover it, right, and then it doesn't make a difference. Okay. So what Mrs. Mokhtar just told us a second ago is that there is another option, and that's called chai. right? Kedera chayta, which means that option C is that it's an open fire. However, you put something totally raw in there a minute before Shabbat. So it's completely not cooked, and it's very clear that you have no intention of eating this tonight because it's so raw. It's going to be a long time before you're able to eat it. According to the halacha, at least this is what it was in the time of Shulchan Aruch, and I believe most poskim say that it's the same today, when things do cook a little bit quicker. The rule is that as long as it was totally raw right before Shabbat, even though you still have an open flame underneath, it's not a problem. Why? Because again, the idea is you are showing that you have no intention of going over to this fire and starting to stir up the coals and increase the flame. Why? Because it's raw. Turning up the flame a little bit more will not help you. Maybe it'll help you in the long run, but for right now, for your immediate Friday night use, it's not going to help. It's totally raw, right? So for that reason, there was no decree against raw foods on an open fire right before Shabbat. You can hear the argument, maybe today it's a little bit different because today we cook things a lot faster than they did back then. We have, continuous flames. Okay, there's a discussion about that. But the simple idea is that if it is a raw food, it could be also left on an open fire. But again, why even get into this whole thing? Get yourself a blech. You have no problem. You don't have to worry about how cooked, not cooked. You don't have to worry about it. This is when it's not not a covered fire. Now, the benefit of a hot plate, as far as Shehiya is concerned, is that most of the hot plates, I know some of them do, but most of the hot plates do not have any knobs on them. It's just a hot plate with nothing else. I mean, some have these knobs on it, but I would recommend getting the ones that don't. And then what you benefit in is that, there's an added benefit as well that usually people don't cook on hot plates. They just warm things up. That'll come up in the laws of Bishul a little bit later. But the simple idea is that being that it is a hot plate that does not have any option of increasing heat, so then if you would want to leave something on the hot plate before Shabbat, you don't really have any problem or a concern of Shema yachateh b'kechalin. You don't have a concern. He might come to stir up the coals. He might come to change it. There's nothing to change. It's just a hot plate. You understand? Clear? That's the benefit of a hot plate. Shehiya is permissible in such a case. Let's talk a little bit about the oven. Can you leave food in an oven before Shabbat and take it out on Shabbat? So Shehiya in the oven today, the poskim say, is the same as Shehiya on an open fire. The rules would be the same. You would have to cover the source of the heat if you would want to leave it in there partially cooked and not, fully cooked, etc. The major concern about taking food out of an oven before Shabbat, leaving food in an oven before Shabbat and taking it out on Shabbat is one major concern. If your oven adjusts based on the temperature that it's set to, that would mean that, let's say you open an oven and cool air would go in, and that would increase the flame because the thermometer now is going to cause the flame to get stronger so it maintains temperature, then you just did most likely Isur of Mav'ir Deoraita, because it's a direct thing. In other words, you open the oven, cold air goes in, boom, fire increases. That's a major concern. For this purpose, they have what they call Shabbat mode on the oven. Shabbat mode gives you the maintained fire temperature. Now again, this is all if you're leaving the flame on. If you're turning off the oven, which I recommend, because if you do that, then you really don't have any concern of Shehiya whatsoever, and it's still pretty hot. You can leave the oven on all the way up till Shabbat, right before Shabbat, before candlelighting, shut it off, your oven will stay really, really hot. You take out your food, it's piping hot, at least for my oven, it's like that. So then you don't have any issues. Opening.
Is there a Hatzmana issue with that?
What?
Is there a Hatzmana issue with that?
No.
So you can open it and close it?
You can, okay, good question. You can open it, take out what you want, and leave in what you don't want to take out, and close it provided that it's fully cooked. Okay? provided that it's fully cooked. Because if you close it and it's not fully cooked and it's still gonna, the heat is still gonna cook it, you have a problem. But if it's fully cooked, so then there's really no
What
problem.
about the hatmana problem? Or is it just stoking the fire problem? What problem is it?
When?
If it's not fully cooked?
If then you have a bishul problem. Then the increase of the heat, the fact that you closed it keeps the heat in, which actually further cooks it.
Why is that not considered insulation?
Insulation is when you wrap the item directly. You take out an item and you insulate it. That's the usual understanding of it. When you take something, you take something that's hot, clearly shown, take it out, and you put it inside of blankets, towels, things to maintain the heat. This is not on it directly, as far as I know.
And how does this come into play with warming drawers?
Oh, warming drawers are a different thing. I never really got my head wrapped around warming drawers. What exactly is it? It's like a drawer. It maintains a certain temperature, right? 250.
I mean, they have different degrees.
It has different
low, medium,
degrees?
high.
Right. So warming drawers. That I'll get back to you. I don't remember exactly that. I looked into it one time, but I never really mastered the warming drawer yet. We'll get back to you about that.
Can I ask a question on this?
Yes.
It's a separate topic, but for challah, a lot of times like I'll put plastic wrap and then I'll do foil, I'll put it in a freezer, and then when I take it out on Shabbat or before Shabbat, I'll take off the plastic wrap and then I'll wrap it in foil. And then that I'll put on top of like a pot or whatever.
Meaning you're gonna take a challah wrapped up in foil and put it on a hot plate?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's,
So
there's no it's completely
frozen.
no, it's
What?
completely wrapped. Like there's no holes inside because I don't want it to become soggy.
So I'm saying you're taking a challah out of the freezer, you're wrapping it up in foil and putting it on the hot plate. Okay, so there's a whole discussion about hatmana. Is that insulation or not? Why?
Right.
Where's the insulation? Well, the answer is the heat is going right underneath it and it's trapped inside the foil. So there's a whole discussion as to whether that's okay. So Hashem, we'll get to that when we learn hatmana. But it's preferable just for your own. Better to just leave part of it open.
Okay.
Understand? That would be better. So it's not a hatmana question. Yeah.
So just to clarify, if the oven is off, like right before Shabbat,
Yeah.
and you take out something, you said we're still not allowed to close the door again on other foods.
You could if it's fully cooked. Because my point is like this: if your oven is still really, 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 really hot, and you closing the oven is gonna allow for the continued cooking, so you just did an act of cooking on Shabbat.
So this would be this prohibition of Shehiya, or it would be another prohibition of Bishul?
That would be bishul.
But it's not
Bishul
this
question.
prohibition.
No.
There wouldn't be this
No,
prohibition.
no.
And also, how
If
is
that would be the situation, that you still have stuff that's not yet cooked, and you opened up the oven, you wouldn't be allowed to close it unless you take everything out.
that's not yet cooked?
Yeah.
Okay. And also, how is that
If
different?
it's hot, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Maybe
How
you
is
wait
that
till it cools
different
off.
than like a fridge? I'm not even talking about the fridge that have sensors, that the sensors when you open and close it. Let's say an old fridge that doesn't have sensors and it's not smart. Even that, when you open and close, once you open and close it, automatically the temperature inside will change, and a fridge is meant to keep it at the same
It's
temperature.
a good question. It's a very good question. They talk about that question. The first difference is there's a big difference between electric appliances and an actual fire coming out. So it's a question of Derabanan versus Deraita. That's number one, according to many. Not everyone agrees, but they apply different. But once you lower it to a lower level violation, so then you should know. By the way, many agree with you. Many agree that what you said is correct. But for those who are lenient and they open the fridge while the motor is not running, so they employ different reasoning behind it, which is a little more complicated. Self-secretion, different ideas. There, we have to get into that. It's a little beyond the scope of the class. Yeah. Yes.
So how come that's hatmana when she puts the challah on the fire? That's already fully cooked, but you can't open.
She wrapped it in silver foil.
Because
So
even
the
if it's
heat-
fully cooked, then it's
What?
wrapped. Okay. I
Yeah.
understand.
So the
'Cause it was
heat
fully
that
wrapped.
goes in doesn't go out. That's a whole discussion about hatmana. It's different.
Okay.
Yeah. So as far as Shehiya is concerned, I hope it was clear so far. The idea that if it's on an open fire, we have a machloket. How cooked does it need to be before Shabbat? Chachamim say it needs to be until it's mitztamek ve'ralo. Only mitztamek ve'ralo is okay. Again, that it's so cooked that the continued cooking is detrimental. The opinion of Hananya is that no, as long as it's a third cook, it's okay. Then we said, but that's all in an open fire. What about if it's covered? So we said covered is okay no matter how cooked it is. What about a hot plate? Hot plate is okay if it doesn't have any knobs. So as far as Shehiya is concerned, nothing really can happen. Somebody asked me on Friday, can she leave water on an open fire before Shabbat that was never cooked before? So to that we say, well, wait a second. Water getting cooked, meaning becoming hot, there's a concern we might stir up the coals, right? Now, that's a problem. So the water would need to have reached boiling temperature if you want to leave it on an open fire before Shabbat, right? Because at that point already, it's tamek viralo. Why? Because of the fact that it's, at that point, again, going with the machmir opinion of Chachamim, right? Mitztamek viralo would mean that it's boiling and therefore it's evaporating. So it's at the point where it's no longer good to increase the flame. Now again, that's all because she wanted to leave it on an open fire. If she didn't want to leave it on an open fire, you don't have any concern. You cover it up with a glass. You're good. Clear? Yes.
With the hot plate, sometimes there is a knob that increases the temperature.
Right.
Are you supposed to cover the knob, or you?
If you cover it, then yeah, you're good because you're not going to touch it. Yeah.
And how about with the crock pot? Do you have to cover the knobs or just the?
It's not an obligation, but it's a good idea. Cover it, take it off. It's not an obligation, but it's good. Yeah.
But if you have an oven, you're not gonna, like if you have like a stove, you're not gonna touch the fire. Like let's say you have a stove.
Yeah.
The problem would just be the knobs. That's the only way you have to increase the fire.
True.
You can't touch
Good question.
the fire.
True. The answer to that is though we cannot extend the decree of the Chachamim. Chachamim said cover the fire. So that's beyond what they said. So it's a good idea. It's praiseworthy to cover it, but it's not mandatory.
Okay.
Understand? Yeah. All right, guys. Yeah.
Sorry, turning the crock pot around, is that considered similar to covering the knob?
Turning the crock.
So you're not looking at it, you're not looking at it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want that benefit, you would cover it or remove it.
But it's not obligatory, just an added.
No, it's not an obligation. But Moshe Feinstein speaks about that. He says it's not an obligation. Okay, I think we can stop here for today. I hope it was clear. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out. Yes.
But is it? I'm just curious. Is it done at all to actually put stuff on top of open fire? Because I've never heard anybody do that. Even if technically would be allowed. No, I'm just curious if there are people that not that I'm interested. Obviously, I wouldn't do it, but like. Is it something that's like practical?
Yeah,
like
this lady just called me on Friday. She wanted to leave her water on an open fire. So.
But technically, if somebody asks, they would
What?
actually, like, there are people that actually get permission to like actually like leave like fully cooked cholent on an open fire.
Yeah, like for example, let's say your insert is directly on the heating element of
Right,
the
and
crock.
for the crock pot, yeah.
You don't have the tin foil in between. So that would be a case like this. It depends. You know, if you're following the opinion of Hananya, the more lenient opinion, it would need to at least be half cooked or third cooked. You know, at least if it's less, if it's raw, again we said it's okay, right? Then it's no problem. But if it's in between raw and a third, which it might be when you just made it an hour before Shabbat, so then you would not be allowed to leave it on the heating element unless you do something to allow
What
that.
about the whole Hatmanah issue then?
You would have Atmanah issue too. So that's why it's always a good idea to put that tinfoil there regardless. But yeah, you would have a problem for multiple reasons. Okay guys, thank you. Next week. Next week is
Does anybody have any problems with next So they know all the like oven. All my friends
So
have
Sunday night.
the oven.
Does anybody have any problems with the next
I don't
week's
know any of
class?
that.
Hanukkah?
What time?
Is there garbage?
We're gonna start with 11:30. No.